The stench of human industry and burning flesh clung to the frigid air, a constant, sickening perfume. On the night of April 7, 1944, two men, barely distinguishable from the carefully stacked wood, vanished into a makeshift grave just beyond the barbed wire of Auschwitz-Birkenau. For 72 agonizing hours they would lie motionless, soaked in a concoction designed to blind the sniffer dogs, their silence a desperate gamble against the methodical, chilling search of the SS. They carried no weapons, no escape plan, etched on paper. Their only cargo was a truth, forged in the crucible of hell, a truth so devastating it could ignite a world. This is the story of two young prisoners who dared to confront the architects of humanity's greatest crime, not with force, but with knowledge. They were eyewitnesses to an operation of industrial death, and they believed their testimony could shatter the silence surrounding it. But in a world steeped in denial and disbelief, could the truth truly set millions free? Before we delve into this incredible account, tell us in the comments, where are you watching us from today? To understand their audacious gamble, we must first journey back, long before that desperate night, to the beginning of Walter Rosenberg's transformation into Rudolf Vrba. The transformation of Walter Rosenberg into Rudolf Vrba commenced in the early summer of 1942, as the gears of the Nazi extermination machine accelerated across occupied Europe. At just 18 years old, Walter, like countless others, was forcibly transported from his native Slovakia. The journey itself was a prelude to the horrors awaiting him, a confinement for days in an overcrowded, unventilated cattle car, devoid of food, water, or basic sanitation. The air inside grew thick with the stench of fear, sweat, and human waste, a suffocating environment that slowly stripped away the veneer of civilization even before arrival. When the train finally jolted to a halt, the sound of screeching metal gave way to the terrifying shouts of SS guards, amplified by the cacophony of barking German shepherds. This was Auschwitz. The doors of the wagon were flung open, revealing a bleak industrial landscape under a sky often stained by distant smoke. This was not the typical prison camp Walter had perhaps imagined. It was a vast, sprawling complex of barbed wire, guard towers, and endless rows of wooden barracks. The disembarkation was brutal, a violent rush onto a gravel ramp where families were instantly ripped apart by men in uniform, their faces impassive. Commands were barked in German, comprehensible through their sheer aggression, instructing men to the left, women and children to the right. Walter witnessed the immediate terror in the eyes of those who grasped the finality of these separations. The last desperate glances exchanged across an ever-widening chasm. His processing was swift and dehumanizing. Stripped naked, his head shaven, he was then subjected to the chilling ritual of tattooing. A7113 was etched onto his forearm, replacing his name, his identity, his very self. He was issued a thin, striped uniform, indistinguishable from the thousands worn by others. The initial shock of the physical ordeal was quickly superseded by the constant, gnawing presence of hunger. The rations, a meager slice of bread, a watery soup, were barely enough to sustain life, ensuring a perpetual state of physical weakness and mental exhaustion. This systematic deprivation was part of the camp's design, reducing individuals to mere biological functions, easier to control and to dispose of. Above all, there was the omnipresent, visceral reality of the crematoria. Their chimneys, tall and stark against the often gray skies, perpetually belched thick black smoke. The wind, when it shifted, carried with it an acrid, sweetish smell that became the defining scent of Auschwitz, the unmistakable odor of burning human flesh. This constant sensory assault served as an undeniable, horrifying reminder of the camp's true purpose, a silent but unambiguous statement of its daily operations. It permeated everything, a constant psychological torment that undercut any fleeting hope. Walter, now Rudolf Vrba by official camp designation, found himself assigned a unique and profoundly disturbing position, a registrar. This role was not earned through choice, but through a combination of his youth, his relative strength upon arrival, and the arbitrary nature of SS assignment. His duties brought him to a large sorting facility known by prisoners as Canada, a cynical reference to a land of abundance. Here, the belongings of the newly arrived, those who had just passed through the selection process, were meticulously sorted, cataloged, and prepared for shipment back to Germany. Day after day, Vrba confronted the tangible remnants of lives extinguished. Piles of suitcases, often labeled with names and addresses that would never be reached, were emptied. Inside, he found everything from cherished family photographs and treasured heirlooms to mundane kitchen utensils, children's toys, and worn clothing. Each item was a silent testament to a life, a family, a community eradicated. He cataloged watches, jewelry, eyeglasses, even human hair, destined for German industry. The sheer volume was staggering, a material representation of the vast human cost. This position granted Vrba an unparalleled, albeit horrifying, insight into the logistics of the extermination program. He observed the arrival schedules of the transports, the specific railway lines used, the frequency of the trains, the regions of Europe from which they originated. He saw the new arrivals disembark, their faces a mixture of confusion, exhaustion, and, for some, a dawning comprehension of their fate. He witnessed the selections on the ramp, where SS doctors, most notably Dr. Josef Mengele, with a flick of a wrist or a casual gesture, condemned thousands to immediate death. He saw the two distinct lines form, one shorter and leading to labor, the other longer and winding towards the distant low-lying buildings disguised as bathhouses. Vrba quickly understood the systematic nature of these events. This was not random violence, it was a factory of death, operating with chilling precision. Driven by an urgent, almost involuntary instinct for survival and a nascent sense of moral imperative, he began to commit every detail to memory. He understood that this meticulously orchestrated terror was designed to be erased, its scale and horror unimaginable to the outside world. His mind became a repository of facts, a living counter-archive against the SS's efforts to conceal. He focused on specifics. The numbers of the trains, often stenciled on their sides, were linked in his memory to their points of origin: Paris, Budapest, Prague, Warsaw. He recorded the dates of their arrival and the estimated number of individuals they carried. He noted the nationalities of the deportees, tracing the geographic spread of the Holocaust across the continent. With meticulous mental discipline, he began to reconstruct the camp's internal geography, the layout of the gas chambers and crematoria, the paths the condemned were forced to take, the locations of guard posts, and the subtle variations in security procedures. He even learned details of the extermination methods themselves, from the quantity of Zyklon B pellets used to the grim sequence of events that followed the gassing, as the Sonderkommandos, prisoners forced to work in the crematoria, disposed of the bodies. This act of mental resistance was an extraordinary feat of will in an environment designed to crush the spirit. The constant malnutrition, the brutal labor, the pervasive fear, and the omnipresent spectacle of death made sustained concentration a near impossibility for most. Yet Vrba cultivated his memory as a weapon. He repeated details to himself during roll calls, etched numbers into his mind while sorting belongings, and pieced together fragments of information gleaned from whispered conversations among prisoners who had witnessed other aspects of the camp's machinery. He sensed, with an almost desperate prescience, that this knowledge, if it could ever reach the outside world, might hold the key to preventing further atrocities. His observations were corroborated by the larger context of the war. By 1942, the Nazis' Operation Reinhard was in full, brutal swing. Extermination camps like Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka had reached their peak efficiency, systematically murdering hundreds of thousands of Jews. As these camps began to slow or cease operations, Auschwitz-Birkenau rapidly assumed the central role in the final solution. Its capacity expanded, its processes streamlined. Vrba's internal archive was not just a record of local atrocities, it was a precise ledger of the evolving continent-wide genocide. As the months turned into a year and then beyond, the burden of this knowledge weighed heavily on Vrba. It was a lonely undertaking, this silent accumulation of truth, until he encountered Alfred Wetzler. Wetzler, a fellow Slovakian Jew, was 7 years older than Vrba. He too had endured the journey to Auschwitz, and through a combination of circumstances, had gained a similar, detailed understanding of the camp's internal workings. Their paths likely crossed during labor details or within the crowded barracks. A quiet understanding developed between them. In an environment where trust was a dangerous luxury and self-preservation paramount, Vrba and Wetzler recognized in each other a kindred spirit, an intellect that refused to be dulled, a spirit of observation that defied the camp's efforts at complete obfuscation. Their conversations, initially guarded, gradually delved deeper into the systematic nature of what they were witnessing. They shared observations, confirmed details, and collectively built a more comprehensive mental map of the camp's operations. Both men possessed a meticulous attention to detail and a shared, profound conviction that the truth of Auschwitz could not be allowed to die with its victims. This intellectual partnership, born in the darkest corners of human history, would become the foundation of an audacious plan that dared to challenge the very architects of the final solution. By the spring of 1944, Auschwitz-Birkenau underwent a critical transformation, intensifying its role in the Nazi extermination program. Rudolf Vrba and Alfred Wetzler, positioned within the camp's intricate logistical operations, observed these changes with a growing sense of alarm. Their combined intelligence, honed by months of meticulous observation, enabled them to discern the subtle yet unmistakable shifts in the camp's operational rhythm, all pointing towards an imminent and catastrophic expansion of its killing capacity. The usual transports began to dwindle, replaced by dedicated construction efforts within Birkenau. Vrba, working in Canada, and Wetzler, with access to various sectors, exchanged hushed observations. They noted the increased diversion of labor details to the crematoria complexes, crematoriums 2, 3, 4, and V, the camp's most efficient killing centers. Work focused on expanding their capacity, optimizing victim flow, and adding new holding areas. The constant sounds of construction, the heavy labor, all served the grim purpose of facilitating mass murder on an unprecedented scale. The most significant development was the construction of a new railway spur. This direct branch line extended deep into Birkenau, terminating perilously close to the gas chambers. This new arrival ramp circumvented the main Auschwitz station, eliminating the need for long marches or truck transfers. Vrba witnessed its completion with profound dread, understanding its purpose: to rapidly disembark human cargo directly into the heart of the extermination area, designed for maximum speed and unprecedented efficiency of death. Simultaneously, intelligence filtered through the prisoner networks, corroborated by the arrival of high-ranking SS officials. Adolf Eichmann, the chief architect of the Holocaust's logistics, had established himself in Budapest. His presence signaled the imminent implementation of what Vrba and Wetzler rightly suspected would be the final solution's most concentrated act of genocide: the systematic deportation of the remaining Hungarian Jews. Hungary, a German ally, had largely resisted such deportations until early 1944, but the political landscape had shifted, and the Nazis were poised to complete their objective. Eichmann's personal mission was to orchestrate the rapid transport of over 430 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. The tension within the camp became palpable. Vrba observed these new preparations with an overwhelming sense of urgency. The expanded gas chambers and the new railway ramp provided irrefutable evidence that Auschwitz was being prepared for an influx of victims far exceeding any previous capacity. He mentally cross-referenced these internal observations with external intelligence about Eichmann. The convergent details, numbers, dates, logistical improvements solidified a terrifying understanding. Hundreds of thousands of lives were about to be extinguished in a compressed time frame, faster and on a larger scale than ever before. This realization solidified the desperate purpose behind Vrba and Wetzler's long-planned escape. Their initial motive to expose the truth of Auschwitz now coalesced into a precise, immediate mission: to warn the world, specifically the Hungarian Jewish community, of the impending catastrophe. Their meticulously accumulated knowledge, transport numbers, extermination methods, camp layout, and chemical details was no longer merely evidence. It was a potential instrument of salvation. Time was critically short. For weeks, under constant threat of discovery, Vrba and Wetzler finalized every detail of their audacious plan. Their strategy was deceptively simple, but profoundly risky. To hide within a stack of wood located in the death strip, the forbidden zone between the inner and outer perimeter fences of Birkenau. They aimed to remain concealed for 3 days, a period during which camp protocol dictated that intensive searches would be conducted within the camp, after which a successful escape from the immediate perimeter would be assumed. The chosen woodpile, near Vrba's Canada section, offered a plausible, albeit suffocating, hiding spot. The SS dogs posed a primary threat. Through whispered exchanges with Soviet prisoners, a crude but effective countermeasure had been learned, a mixture of gasoline, tobacco, and pepper. This pungent concoction, it was believed, would overpower and confuse the dogs' acute sense of smell, rendering them unable to track human scent. Sourcing these components within the confines of the camp was a perilous undertaking, requiring careful bartering and clandestine acquisitions, each small act of defiance risking immediate execution. The night of April 7, 1944, was bitterly cold and stark. The air, heavy with the familiar sickening stench of the crematoria, hung thick and still. Vrba, now 19, and Wetzler, 26, moved with practiced stealth, their movements almost imperceptible in the pre-dawn darkness. Just before the critical 8:00 p.m. evening roll call, when prisoners were counted and any disappearances noted, they slipped into their pre-arranged hiding spot. They burrowed deep into the loosely stacked timber, creating a small, suffocating cavity, barely large enough for 2 bodies to lie prone, side by side. Their thin, worn clothes had been carefully soaked in the volatile mixture of gasoline, tobacco, and pepper. The fumes were overpowering, burning their eyes and throats, a torment they endured as a necessary shield. They lay absolutely motionless, every muscle tensed, listening to the sounds of the camp, the distant shouts of the SS, the clatter of boots, and the low, menacing growl of guard dogs patrolling the outer perimeter. The woodpile itself offered minimal comfort, its rough edges digging into their skin, the bitter cold seeping into their bones. The ensuing 72 hours constituted an agonizing test of endurance. As anticipated, their absence was discovered during the evening roll call, triggering an immediate and frantic search operation. SS guards, often accompanied by their dogs, swept through the camp, meticulously searching barracks and overturning anything that could conceal a body. The search extended to the death strip and the areas immediately surrounding the fences. Vrba and Wetzler, buried deep within their timber prison, heard the approaching footsteps, the aggressive commands of the guards, and the excited, chilling barks of the dogs. Each passing hour was a battle against discovery. They remained absolutely still, their breathing shallow, their physical discomfort constant. The powerful fumes of the gasoline mixture, while tormenting, offered a desperate hope that it was effectively masking their scent from the dogs, which occasionally sniffed directly above their heads. The omnipresent fear of discovery, a cold dread, alternated with the burning urgency of their mission. To be found meant not only their own brutal deaths, but the failure of their desperate attempt to warn the world. Hunger and thirst became relentless companions. The cold permeated their bodies, threatening hypothermia. Every creak of the wood, every distant shout, every dog's bark sent a jolt of terror through their exhausted frames. Time ceased to be linear. It became an eternity of stillness, punctuated by moments of acute terror. They endured the metallic clang of shovels against frozen earth as guards probed the ground around them, the sudden shadow of a passing SS patrol, and the agonizing proximity of a dog's panting breath. Through the darkness of the nights and the deceptive quiet of the days, they clung to their shared purpose. Their survival was no longer solely about their individual lives. It was inextricably linked to the millions they hoped to save. The comprehensive scope of the Hungarian operation, the expanded gas chambers, the new railway ramp, and Adolf Eichmann's logistical precision. All these meticulously memorized details fueled their resolve. They were living, breathing evidence, and their only chance to deliver that evidence lay in surviving these 72 hours of suffocating immobility. As the hunt for them began to subside, with the SS expanding their search further afield, Vrba and Wetzler waited, suspended between life and death, carrying a truth that demanded to be heard. After 72 hours of agonizing stillness, Suspended between life and death within their timber prison, Vrba and Wetzler emerged. The pre-dawn air of April 10, 1944 was still frigid, but the suffocating confinement of the woodpile had given way to an expanse of vast, terrifying freedom. Their bodies, stiff and aching from 3 days of immobility, protested every movement. The lingering fumes of gasoline, tobacco, and pepper still clung to their clothes and hair, a constant burning reminder of their desperate gamble. Their eyes, accustomed to the absolute darkness, struggled to adjust to the faint starlight that pierced the overcast sky, amplifying the shadows into menacing shapes. Their immediate surroundings were still the death strip, the treacherous no-man's land between Auschwitz-Birkenau's inner and outer perimeter fences. Every rustle of leaves, every distant dog's bark, every creak of the guard towers sent a jolt of primal fear through their exhausted frames. Their first steps were tentative, their movements slow, deliberate, and imbued with an acute sense of vulnerability. They moved like ghosts, using the shadows cast by the distant barracks and the low scrub vegetation to begin their perilous 130-kilometer journey southeast towards the Slovak border. Their route was dictated by the need for absolute concealment. They avoided roads, which were patrolled by German forces and their collaborators. Instead, they plunged into the dense, unforgiving forests that stretched across the Polish and later Slovakian landscapes. These forests, dark and silent, became both their sanctuary and their tormentor. The terrain was challenging, uneven ground, thick undergrowth that snagged their thin uniforms, and hidden roots that threatened to trip them in the darkness. They traveled exclusively at night, moving under the cover of moonless skies or obscured by heavy cloud cover, guided by an innate sense of direction and the distant glint of constellations. During the day, they sought refuge in the deepest parts of the woods, burrowing into thickets or seeking the meager shelter of rock formations. Sleep was a restless, shallow affair, constantly interrupted by the fear of discovery. The gnawing pangs of hunger became a constant companion. They scavenged what they could: wild berries, edible roots, anything that might provide a modicum of sustenance. Water was drawn from icy streams, its clarity a stark contrast to the murkiness of their situation, but its coldness adding to their constant discomfort. The weather itself was an additional adversary. April in the Carpathian foothills brought unpredictable conditions. Days could be deceptively mild, but nights plummeted to freezing temperatures. They faced cold rain that soaked through their threadbare clothing, chilling them to the bone and risking hypothermia. Later, as they ascended into the lower reaches of the Tatra Mountains, they encountered residual snow and icy winds that cut through them, each gust a physical assault. Their emaciated bodies, already weakened by years of malnutrition in the camp, struggled against the elements. Every muscle ached, every joint screamed in protest, but the sheer willpower to survive and fulfill their mission drove them onward. The psychological toll was immense. The constant threat of German patrols, visible in the distance as flickering flashlights or audible as the distant rumble of trucks, amplified every natural sound. A snapping twig could be a guard's footstep. The hoot of an owl could be a coded signal. The rustle of leaves in the wind became a whispered warning. Paranoia was a potent enemy, pushing their already strained minds to the brink. They communicated in hushed whispers, relying on silent gestures and knowing glances to convey instructions or warnings. They were two small figures against a vast, hostile landscape, hunted by a regime that had built an empire on their destruction. Their resilience was tested to its absolute limits. There were moments of despair, of physical collapse, where the sheer impossibility of their task threatened to overwhelm them. But the memory of Auschwitz, the indelible images of the selections, the stench of the crematoria, and the urgent knowledge of the impending Hungarian deportations spurred them on. They were living conduits of truth, and their survival was now inextricably linked to the fate of hundreds of thousands. They discussed their carefully memorized facts, reinforcing each other's recollections, ensuring that no detail would be lost should only one of them survive. After 11 grueling days and nights, their odyssey neared its climax. On April 21, 1944, exhausted, emaciated, and barely recognizable, Vrba and Wetzler finally crossed the border into Slovakia. It was a moment of profound, almost unbelievable relief, tinged with the stark reality that their mission had just begun. Their first objective was to make contact with the underground network. After careful, clandestine approaches, they managed to locate members of the Slovakian Jewish Working Group, an underground resistance organization based in Jelena. Initially, their story was met with a degree of understandable skepticism. The sheer scale of the atrocities they described, the meticulous industrialization of murder, bordered on the unimaginable. No one outside the camps had yet grasped the full, horrifying truth. However, Vrba and Wetzler possessed an overwhelming advantage: the cold, hard, verifiable facts. They provided details that could only be known by an eyewitness intimately familiar with the camp's inner workings. They spoke of the camp's precise layout, the numbers tattooed on prisoners, the specific dates of transports, the names of SS officers, and the architectural specifications of the crematoria. The members of the Jewish Working Group, led by people like Gysi Fleischmann and Rabbi Michael Dov Weissmandl, quickly recognized the credibility of the two escapees. They understood the immense significance of this first-hand testimony. Immediately, Vrba and Wetzler embarked on the crucial task of dictating their testimony. For days, in a safe house provided by the resistance, they recounted their experiences. Scribes diligently recorded every word, every number, every date. It was a painstaking process, requiring immense concentration from both the escapees and their transcribers. The resulting document, meticulously compiled from their combined memories, became known as the Vrba-Wetzler Report, or Auschwitz Protocols. It was an extraordinary 32-page document, a chillingly precise inventory of the industrial murder machine. It included hand-drawn architectural plans of Auschwitz-Birkenau, detailing the locations of the gas chambers and crematoria. It provided precise descriptions of the extermination process, from the arrival of transports to the disposal of bodies. They gave specific numbers of dead by nationality, offering a verifiable death toll that shocked even the resistance. Crucially, they detailed the operational capacity of the gas chambers and crematory ovens, and even provided the chemical composition and usage of Zyklon B gas. The report was more than just a survivor's account. It was a comprehensive intelligence brief, written with the precision of those who had studied the system from within. It was the tangible materialization of the truth they had risked everything to bring to light. Their odyssey of liberation had concluded, but the true battle, the fight to disseminate this truth and save lives, had only just begun. The fate of hundreds of thousands now rested on how this extraordinary document would be received and acted upon by a world that, for too long, had chosen to remain silent. With the Vrba-Wetzler report meticulously compiled and finalized by the end of April 1944, a new phase of their mission commenced: the desperate, clandestine dissemination of the truth. The 32-page document, a chillingly precise blueprint of Auschwitz-Birkenau's industrialized extermination, became the most critical intelligence brief of the war. It was entrusted to a network of couriers, resistance operatives, and diplomatic channels, each segment of its journey a perilous gamble against the pervasive reach of the Nazi regime and the indifference of the wider world. The hope, fragile yet fiercely held by Vrba and Wetzler, was that these stark facts, presented with such verifiable detail, would finally puncture the veil of silence and disbelief. Copies of the report were immediately dispatched in early May 1944 to several critical destinations, each chosen for its potential to instigate action. One copy, deemed most urgent, was routed to Budapest, addressed to the leadership of the Hungarian Jewish community, specifically to figures within the Jewish Council, Judenrat. Vrba and Wetzler believed these leaders, if informed of the truth, could mobilize their community, warn them, and perhaps even facilitate mass escape or resistance. This was their primary direct target for intervention. Another copy was sent through clandestine networks to the Vatican, utilizing neutral diplomatic channels in Switzerland, appealing to the moral authority of Pope Pius XI. The hope was that the pontiff's intervention might exert political pressure on Hungary's regent, Miklos Horthy, or on the Axis powers. Further copies found their way to the International Red Cross, an organization ostensibly dedicated to humanitarian aid, based in Geneva, and to the Western Allies, primarily via intelligence networks operating in Switzerland and Turkey. These transmissions were meant to spur military or political action, to perhaps bomb the rail lines leading to Auschwitz or even the gas chambers themselves. However, the journey of the report through these various, often labyrinthine channels was fraught with profound challenges, inherent delays, deep-seated skepticism, and crippling bureaucratic inertia. The sheer scale and horrific nature of the atrocities described often defied immediate credulity. Many recipients, even those within Jewish leadership, struggled to reconcile the meticulously documented system of mass murder with their existing understanding of warfare and persecution. The concept of an industrialized death factory, murdering hundreds of thousands, was simply beyond the grasp of many who had not witnessed it firsthand. Within some Jewish circles, particularly in Budapest, there was deep concern that widespread public dissemination of the report might incite mass panic, leading to disorder and even counterproductive actions that could jeopardize ongoing, albeit desperate, negotiations with Eichmann's forces for emigration. There were also those who found the details so utterly unbelievable that they suspected the report itself might be a sophisticated piece of Nazi disinformation or propaganda designed to sow chaos. Thus, within these crucial channels, the report underwent a protracted process of analysis, debate, translation, and verification. Each day, each week, that the report was analyzed, deliberated upon, or simply stalled in bureaucratic pathways, the critical window of opportunity to save lives narrowed irrevocably. The mechanisms of diplomacy and international communication, by their very nature, moved with a slowness that stood in stark, tragic contrast to the urgent information they carried. While the Vrba Wetzler report slowly navigated these complex, resistant channels, the Nazi extermination machine, under the direct orchestration of SS Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann in Budapest, accelerated with terrifying methodical efficiency. Eichmann, the cold calculating architect of the logistical final solution, had established his headquarters in a requisitioned mansion in Budapest, personally overseeing an operation designed for maximum speed and minimal resistance. He meticulously coordinated with the collaborationist Hungarian government and its gendarmerie, ensuring that the roundups and deportations proceeded with ruthless precision. From May 15 to July 9, 1944, a relentless and unprecedented wave of deportations swept through Hungary. The process was swift and brutal. Jewish communities were ordered to assemble, often under the false pretense of resettlement for labor in the East. They were crammed into ghettos, then transported to collection points. The Hungarian gendarmerie, working hand in glove with the SS, enforced the orders with chilling zeal. Families were torn from their homes, forced into cattle cars, often 80 to 100 people packed into each wagon, with no food, water, or sanitation for days. In a mere 56 days, and staggering 437, 00 Hungarian Jews were brutally rounded up, packed into 147 trains, and dispatched directly to Auschwitz-Birkenau. The scale of this operation, its speed and its singular focus, dwarfed all previous deportations. At Auschwitz, the scene was one of unparalleled industrialized annihilation, precisely as Vrba and Wetzler had predicted. The camp, with its newly constructed new arrival ramp extending directly into Birkenau, was now operating at its absolute peak, optimized for this specific massive influx. Trains arrived continuously, sometimes several times a day, disgorging thousands of bewildered, exhausted, and often dehydrated individuals directly into the selection area. The SS guards, along with camp doctors like Mengele, processed the arrivals with ruthless, almost mechanical efficiency. The selection process on the ramp was swift, often taking mere minutes for an entire transport. Approximately 90% of these Hungarian Jews, almost 400, Sort's people, were immediately deemed unfit for work upon arrival and sent directly to the gas chambers, often within hours of stepping off the trains. The crematoria, particularly crematoriums 2 and 3, which were the largest and most technologically advanced, operated around the clock in a relentless effort to keep pace with the influx of victims. Their immense furnaces roared continuously, burning bodies. The air over Auschwitz-Birkenau, already thick with the familiar stench of death, became permanently shrouded in a dense, black pall of smoke. This acrid, greasy smoke, mixed with the fine ash of incinerated human remains, blotted out the sun, turning day into a perpetual twilight. The sheer volume of death was so immense that even the expanded crematoria, designed for maximum efficiency, could not incinerate all the bodies quickly enough. To cope with the overwhelming backlog, the SS resorted to a more primitive, yet equally horrific method. Vast open-air burning pits were dug near the crematoria, where thousands of bodies were doused with gasoline and incinerated, the flames leaping skyward. The sky over the entire region was often darkened by this constant acrid smoke, and fine ash, the remnants of human lives, fell like a macabre snowfall across the camp and its surroundings. The immense scale of this slaughter placed an unimaginable strain on the prisoner laborers known as the Sonderkommandos. These men, mostly Jewish, were forced into the unspeakable task of operating the crematoria, guiding victims into the gas chambers, and then removing and disposing of the bodies. Their numbers were dramatically increased from 224 to nearly 900 men to manage the unprecedented volume of human remains. They worked in shifts, pushed to the brink of physical and psychological collapse, bearing witness to the ultimate horror of the Nazi system, a hell within a hell. The profound contrast between Vrba and Wetzler's urgent, meticulously detailed warning and the slow, often incredulous bureaucratic response proved to be catastrophically devastating. While the report was circulating through diplomatic pouches, debated in committees, and cautiously translated, hundreds of thousands of lives were being systematically extinguished. The vast majority of Hungarian Jews arrived at Auschwitz completely unaware of their true destination or the monstrous fate that awaited them. They had no warning, no opportunity to resist, to hide, or to attempt escape. They believed they were being resettled, transferred to labor camps in the East, or simply relocated. The critical information, the precise details of Auschwitz's extermination capacity, the methods, the specific danger of the new rail ramp, the very name of the camp and its purpose, did not reach them in time. This tragic disjunction, the immense weight of lives lost while the truth was being processed and debated, became one of the most agonizing chapters in the history of the Holocaust, underscoring the profound and irreversible cost of delayed action and human incredulity in the face of unimaginable evil. The harrowing silence that had met the Vrba-Wetzler report during its initial circulation began to shatter in June 1944. After weeks of cautious assessment, translation, and verification, the meticulously compiled document, detailing the industrial scale of extermination at Auschwitz-Birkenau, finally broke into the public consciousness. This was a critical turning point, catalyzed by the tireless efforts of various international groups who understood the report's profound implications. In June 1944, the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, a powerful and widely heard voice across Europe and beyond, began broadcasting details gleaned from the report. These transmissions, initially cautious but increasingly explicit, relayed the horrific truths of Auschwitz to the occupied territories and to the Allied nations. Simultaneously, in the United States, the New York Times, one of the most influential newspapers in the world, published a front-page story on June 20, 1944, based on the Vrba-Wetzler report. The article, titled, "Two Slovak Escapees Describe Auschwitz Killings," laid bare for the first time in a major mainstream publication the systematic nature of the Nazi extermination camps, detailing the gas chambers, the crematoria, and the sheer numbers of victims. The public revelation of such horrific facts, meticulously documented by eyewitnesses, triggered an immediate and unprecedented international outcry. The details provided by Vrba and Wetzler were too specific, too consistent, and too horrifying to ignore. The initial skepticism that had plagued the report's early circulation began to give way to widespread condemnation and a demand for action. Political leaders, who had previously maintained a cautious distance or claimed ignorance, were now directly confronted with undeniable evidence. Among those who reacted forcefully was President Franklin D. Roosevelt. On June 24, 1944, he issued a strong public statement condemning the crimes against humanity being committed by the Nazis. Roosevelt specifically highlighted the systematic extermination of Jews in Hungary and warned that those responsible for these atrocities would face severe consequences. His declaration was a clear signal of the Allies' awareness and resolve, designed to exert maximum psychological pressure on Germany and its collaborators. The most immediate and critical impact of this international pressure was felt in Budapest by Regent Miklós Horthy of Hungary. Horthy, who had initially permitted the deportations under duress of German occupation, now found himself facing a barrage of diplomatic and moral condemnation from across the globe. He received personal, impassioned telegrams from some of the world's most prominent figures. Pope Pius X, the spiritual leader of millions, sent direct appeals to Horthy, urging him to halt the deportations and spare the remaining Jewish population. King Gustav V of Sweden, whose neutral nation had already extended humanitarian aid to Jews, also personally intervened, sending a direct telegram to the Hungarian regent. And from the United States, President Roosevelt himself dispatched a strongly worded message, reinforcing the threats of retribution and emphasizing the moral imperative to cease the killings. This concerted international pressure, fueled directly by the details of the Vrba Wetzler report, proved decisive. On July 9, 1944, Miklós Horthy, bowing to the overwhelming diplomatic and moral condemnation, ordered an immediate halt to the deportations. This order came at a crucial moment. While 437,000 Hungarian Jews had already been deported to Auschwitz between May 15 and July 9, approximately 200,000 Jews still remained in Budapest and other parts of Hungary. Horthy's decision, directly attributable to the global outcry sparked by the Vrba Wetzler report, saved these individuals from immediate deportation and almost certain death. Furthermore, the report had also reached other Jewish communities in regions yet to be fully targeted by the Nazis, allowing some to organize resistance, seek hiding places, or attempt escape, thereby saving additional, though unquantifiable, lives. There is a profound irony in the circumstances surrounding Vrba and Wetzler's escape, and the subsequent impact of their report. The Nazi regime, in its arrogance and absolute belief in the impermeability of its system, had utterly underestimated the possibility of a successful escape from Auschwitz, particularly one with the specific intent of documenting and exposing the genocide. Auschwitz was designed as a fortress of death, its electrified fences, watchtowers, minefields, constant patrols with dogs, and the policy of collective punishment for families of escapees, all intended to render escape impossible. Of the approximately 802 documented escape attempts from Auschwitz between 1940 and 1945, only 144 were successful. Vrba and Wetzler were among the very first to escape with a premeditated, comprehensive mission to inform the world. The SS, so confident in the secrecy and impregnability of their extermination program, maintained meticulous records of transports, capacities, and operations, never conceiving that such details could be used as irrefutable evidence against them. This meticulousness, combined with their underestimation of human resolve, ultimately contributed to their undoing. Rudolf Vrba survived the war, a living testament to the atrocities he had witnessed. He went on to lead a distinguished career as a biochemist, earning a PhD and contributing to scientific research. However, his life was defined not solely by his scientific achievements, but by an unwavering dedication to bearing witness to the Holocaust. For decades he traveled the world, testifying at trials, lecturing at universities, and participating in documentaries, meticulously recounting the horrors of Auschwitz, ensuring that the truth he carried would never be forgotten or denied. Yet Vrba carried an immense personal burden, the haunting question of what if. He grappled with the agonizing thought of whether more lives could have been saved had his report been disseminated more quickly and acted upon with greater urgency. He became a fierce critic of those who, in his view, failed to fully grasp the enormity of the information he and Wetzler had risked everything to provide. He openly criticized certain Jewish leadership figures in Hungary and elsewhere, accusing them of either deliberate suppression, fear-driven inaction, or an inability to comprehend the unprecedented nature of the Nazi genocide, which led them to prioritize negotiation over immediate public warning. Subsequent historical studies have shown that copies of the Vrba Wetzler report indeed reached Zionist leaders and key figures in Istanbul and Switzerland as early as May 1944. The decision not to disseminate it widely among the Hungarian Jewish population was a complex one, driven by a mixture of factors: fear of panic, disbelief about the described horrors, and the desperate hope that ongoing ransom negotiations with Adolf Eichmann might secure the release of some Jews. Tragically, these delays and decisions resulted in hundreds of thousands of lives being lost that might have been spared, or at least warned, had the information been acted upon with the urgency Vrba and Wetzler intended. Rudolf Vrba lived until 2006, never wavering from his commitment to truth. The Vrba-Wetzler report stands today as one of the most important and devastating documents of the Holocaust. It provided irrefutable proof of the systematic nature of the Nazi crimes, becoming crucial evidence in the Nuremberg trials and countless subsequent historical accounts. Its legacy transcends mere numbers. It represents the extraordinary courage of two individuals who refused to be silent victims, but instead chose to risk everything to expose evil. It demonstrates the terrible moral complexity of genocide, how information, even the most vital, can be simultaneously power and immense burden, how knowledge of the truth does not always lead to immediate action, and how bureaucracy and incredulity can be as deadly as any weapon. In the annals of military history, battles are often decided by superior weaponry or brilliant strategy. But this was a battle fought with memory, courage, and truth, where two unarmed young men, through sheer determination, pierced the veil of secrecy surrounding humanity's greatest crime and, in doing so, saved tens of thousands of lives that would otherwise have been lost to silence. The truth, meticulously catalogued in the Vrba-Wetzler report, ultimately pierced the impenetrable veil of secrecy. While the cogs of bureaucracy turned slowly, sacrificing hundreds of thousands in their delay, the relentless efforts of those who championed its message eventually broke through. In June of 1944, the stark realities of Auschwitz, detailed by Vrba and Wetzler, echoed across the airwaves from the BBC and imprinted themselves on the front page of the New York Times. This public revelation, amplified by the condemnation of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and direct pleas from Pope Pius X and King Gustav III of Sweden, converged upon Hungary's regent, Miklós Horthy. On July 9, 1944, the deportations ceased, a reprieve that saved an estimated 200,000 Hungarian Jews from the gas chambers. It was a victory forged in the crucible of delayed action, a testament to the immense power of verifiable truth against a system built on concealment and terror. Yet this triumph was shadowed by the profound irony of Nazi hubris. Their meticulously documented evil, so confidently hidden, became the very evidence that exposed them, underscoring their catastrophic underestimation of human will and the enduring power of testimony. Rudolf Vrba carried this weight for the remainder of his life, a constant internal dialogue of what if, battling not only against denial but against the agonizing specter of lives that might have been spared. The legacy of the Vrba-Wetzler report is etched not merely in its numerical accounting of death, but in its profound illumination of courage, conscience, and the chilling complexities of human response. It stands as an irrefutable testament to the extraordinary individuals who, against impossible odds, refused to be mere victims, choosing instead to become messengers of truth. Their act reveals the terrifying duality of information, a potent weapon for salvation, yet simultaneously a heavy burden, often met with disbelief or bureaucratic inertia. It underscores how the knowledge of impending catastrophe does not always translate into immediate, decisive action, and how the labyrinthine paths of diplomacy and human incredulity can be as lethal as any weapon. In the annals of history, where empires rise and fall through force of arms, this narrative speaks to a different kind of battle, a struggle waged with memory, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of fact. It reminds us that vigilance is an eternal imperative, for the silence of the world can be as deadly as the smoke from any chimney. The story of Vrba and Wetzler forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of truth, responsibility, and the moments when history demands action. What lessons, if any, do you draw from the tragic delays in disseminating the Vrba-Wetzler report? And what, in your estimation, is the most profound challenge in ensuring such truths are not ignored again? Share your reflections in the comments below. For more untold narratives and lost stories from the Second World War, explore our channel for other documentaries that illuminate the hidden corners of history. If this account of courage and truth resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to WW2 Lost Stories for more journeys into the past.